Welcome to FYI, the For-Your Innovation podcast. This show offers an intellectual discussion on technologically enabled disruption, because investing in innovation starts with understanding it. To learn more, visit arc-invest.com.
ARK Invest is a registered investment advisor focused on investing in disruptive innovation. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as a basis for investment decisions. It does not constitute, either explicitly or implicitly, any provision of services or products by ARK. All statements made regarding companies or securities are strictly beliefs and points of view held by ARK or podcast guests and are not endorsements or recommendations by ARK to buy, sell, or hold any security. Clients of ARK Investment Management may maintain positions in the securities discussed in this podcast.
Hello, welcome to the FYI podcast for your innovation with ARK Invest. I'm Brett Winton, ARK's chief futurist. We have a great show for you today. I have Frank Downing, our head of AI research. Hi, Frank.
Hey, Brett. How's it going?
Great. We have a wonderful conversation with Aaron Levie today, who is the CEO and founder of Box. He's founded it 20 years ago, roughly, and has an amazing amount of perspective on AI and how AI software is going to change the world. Frank, how is AI software going to change the world?
It's something we think a lot about. I think it's a dramatic change to how knowledge workers go about their day, changing not only the surfaces or applications that they use, but exactly how capable those applications are. And I think Aaron gives a great perspective, seeing kind of the evolution of the cloud over the last 20 years, both his company as a cloud native product, and then also his company's own use of the cloud and kind of the landscape shifts across both of those landscapes. And now great to get his perspective on what that looks like from the AI side, both how they're using AI internally and also evolving their product suite around AI. And I think it's well timed with all the debates over, this change in productivity, the productivity potential of AI software happening so quickly. Who will be beneficiaries? Who will be disrupted? How big is the total market size? Is it all going to be commoditized and free? These are all topics we dive into.
Yeah. And so net, our internal expectation is there will be trillions of dollars spent on AI software, 7, perhaps 8, perhaps more. And if you do the math, that equates to tens of trillions of dollars in market cap accruing to the entire technology stack that's supporting AI and AI software. And that assumes actually kind of there will be much more in kind of consumer per surplus and productivity advance for the enterprises that are using it all. Box and Aaron certainly seem to be thinking carefully about how they're going to position themselves to both facilitate this and take advantage of these productivity advances. And you can hear more about how he's thinking about it in the conversation to come. So please enjoy. Hello, and welcome to FYI, the For Your Innovation podcast. Today, we're speaking to the man in black, Aaron Levie. He founded Box, I think, basically 20 years ago as a student at USC. And then 10 years ago, Box IPO'd roughly. And since then, Box has gone from a 100 million annualized revenue business to like $1 billion plus, gone from burning 100 million in cash a year to producing 300 million in cash per year. Like a lot has happened over a decade. Aaron, we're really happy to have you on. And it's clear you're spending a lot of time talking to customers and figuring out internally how Box is going to use AI and how enterprise software is going to change and transform with AI. Give us your perspective on the landscape, including everything that's going on, open source, closed source, the whole gamut. What's going to happen here in the future?
Yeah, wow. Do I have like 3 hours for this intro section? How long do I have? You're gonna have to keep me on course. A lot is happening. So first of all, thanks for having me on. I sometimes have to pinch myself on just how lucky I personally got and my friend group got on just like just the pace of this industry and being right at the center of so much that is changing and happening. It's unbelievable. I mean, I've been sort of doing tech for, 28 years. So started building websites in high school, middle school. And so I've been able to watch, the early days of cloud and SaaS and mobile and smartphones. And what's happening in AI right now dramatically exceeds any anything that I've seen in terms of just the pace of change and how much you have to keep track of and everything that's happening. So, I think there's like two or three big categories that we think about. So one is, how will it shape just the future of the enterprise? Like, what will work look like in the future when you have AI, agents running around and helping us automate way more of what we do? Obviously, the second one is sort of what is, the business model that we then need to have and as a platform. So what we do is we help enterprises manage their most important data and unstructured data in particular. And then that leads to obviously a whole bunch of implications on like, what's the future of technology look like? What's the business model of software? What's the business model of AI? So a bunch of kind of pieces there. But yeah, I mean, it's an unbelievably exciting time because so many of these age-old things that we've always wanted to do with computers, where you just ask a computer to do something for you. Now we're actually getting, increasingly close to that being the real vision. And so we look at that purely through the lens of the enterprise market, and what the future of, kind of the enterprise will look like in an AI first world of business.
I know you are talking to customers, you're figuring out how to help customers implement things. You're figuring out how to up level, call it Box's product suite. So it incorporates kind of these capabilities that customers will take on. And we internally debate kind of like, how quickly is kind of existing enterprise going to be able to adopt kind of this radical set of advances that are occurring? Since a lot of times enterprise software CIOs, they're like, okay, I need something that's stable so that then I can underwrite it, so I can buy it in and understand exactly what it's going to do. But with AI, it seems like we are delivering product capabilities that the people that develop them don't actually know like how performant the products are. And so it's almost a mismatch to traditional kind of like CIO driven purchasing. So how do you think about that?
I look at this through the lens of again, getting kind of lucky on the time frame where we saw the very early rise of cloud within the enterprise. And so, we were more at the application layer of cloud, but we had to convince customers, why it was safe to put your data in the cloud, what the future of the security paradigm would look like, why it was more efficient. And so if I can compare and contrast to the early days of cloud, in the early days of cloud, very much like AI, you went after the kind of dev test sort of, kind of fringe use cases around the edge of the organization where you had maybe the most innovative, people that were the kind of power users of technology. If you think about kind of, Jeffrey Moore has this idea of crossing the chasm. There's kind of early innovators that use technology as a way of kind of getting ahead. Then there's a chasm, and then you have the kind of pragmatists and early majority that adopt. And so cloud was sort of stuck in this early innovator period for 3 to 5 years, I'd say, where you'd go into a bank and the bank CIO maybe would be willing to meet you, but the only use case in the bank was sort of one edge use case that wasn't like the core production, workload. And there was real sort of resistance, at that time, let's say 2010, let's say 2007 to 2012, where enterprises were like, I'm going to test this stuff. I'm not going to deploy it at scale. We're going to try for a few use cases. We're not even sure if we even want this to be the future of our architecture. And that was the environment for a number of years. And so you had very kind of slow early growth in the cloud as a result of that in the enterprise. Compare that to AI. I'd say there's a couple similarities, a couple differences to what you just said. Some similarities are, I can't deploy this thing across all production tomorrow because I don't know how this works. Could it hallucinate? Could it run rogue and make decisions for me that I don't want it to make? In some industries, you even have a kind of a liability and compliance and kind of governance question. Am I allowed to have AI make trades for me, or can it recommend financial advice, or can it recommend a particular healthcare, regimen? So you have, an overhang of some regulatory questions. But the thing that is very different is, and this is off of hundreds of customer conversations in, let's say, the past year, mostly at the CIO level, sometimes CEO, but CIO and kind of the IT organization, almost universally with very limited exception, everybody knows that this is the future. And this is not like a debate of like the philosophy of technology like there was with cloud. Cloud, you had a real question of, should I be on-prem or should I be in the cloud? That question kind of added a lot of the friction and resistance in the early days. Now it's universally true that everybody knows they're going to be an AI enterprise. And then it's just a question of, how do I get there? What are my partners to get there? Is my data ready to get there? Are the models at a point of sort of maturity and predictability where I can finally deploy it for the mission critical workflows? but everybody's on board. And now it's a matter of when, not if. And so very different environment. I don't know what that tells you in terms of how to model the kind of growth rate of internal, kind of workloads inside of corporate America or corporations as opposed to the kind of infrastructure providers. But I think you'll just continue to see it be a compounding rate of increase over time.
Why do you think the reaction is different from the cloud? Is it that ChatGPT is such an impressive demo that everybody's using that they're like, I know what value this adds and I need to use it? Or is it because, you could tie an agent to actually replacing human work product in a more direct way? Or like, why is it so different?
Certainly all of the above. I mean, I think the ChatGPT moment was so significant for just creating this instantaneous recognition and understanding of what we mean by AI, like having this assistant and then eventually kind of agent that can just go off and support you on anything. And that obviously blew everybody away. I don't know that I would say that the cloud ever had that moment. People sort of in the know were like, oh, this is really cool. I can have like virtual workloads that are, that I can, sort of spin up and it's elastic and that's super cool. And, the developer community often in Silicon Valley or the people paying attention to the forums in those early days, maybe spread around the world, they were certainly wowed. And it's like, wow, I could just deploy, 10 servers instantaneously as opposed to one at a time. But there was certainly no like broad-based holy crap moment that everybody equally experienced. And so AI now has had that with ChatGPT, going back 2 years. I think you have a demographic, element to this, which is a lot of people will just recognize like there's simply no way that you could be hiring people in the future that have kind of grown up with AI. They grew up with AI in high school or college. They did their work this way. They learned how to code this way, and then they would enter a workplace where everything was effectively like the analog version of that, where I just have to do everything myself. I have to find the information myself. Like, how much more inefficient is that going to be for the future of your workforce? And so I think there's a recognition that work is going to fundamentally change as a result of AI. And then to your last point, there's just very marked automation benefits. Like you just look at a workflow that you're doing. What we handle a lot is helping people automate workflows around documents and content. And you could either spend thousands of hours with human labor to go like read through documents and pull out data from those documents, or you could just press a button and automate it. And it's a no-brainer question. So I don't think anybody's resisting AI. And again, it's just really finding the use cases where the technology is the right fit for that use case.
That new employee poll is really interesting. Like it reminds me of using Google Docs in college when it first came out, and then going to work and having like the pre-Office 365 versions of Word and being like, you mean we can't edit two documents at the same time? Like it was just like, or this two people at the same time. Yeah.
I've thought about that analogy a lot, which is like we had this era of consumerization of IT, and we had this theory, like let's say like Box's contemporaries were Slack and Zoom and Yammer, and the idea was that consumers would sort of bring their expectations to enterprise software and then adopt these sort of more end user consumer centric tools like Box, like Slack, et cetera. And that worked, and we got a lot of virality, and there was a lot of end user adoption. But I think that the delta on sort of the AI to non-AI version of that is going to be so much larger. Like you were less productive because you weren't using Google Docs versus the pre-Office 365 version. But imagine learning how to code with Cursor and then going into an environment where you didn't have Cursor, as just to take an example. Like you probably wouldn't be able to code. It's not the equivalent of like, oh, that process is inefficient. It would just your like brain won't work anymore because you were used to having full intelligence at your disposal, just helping you get through every single step when you're building something, and that is a completely different way to operate in the future.
Yeah, I do wonder the other kind of adoption forcing mechanism here could as well be there's the competitive dynamics are so severe. If you don't adopt it, you'll die. And so it's like very different from like cloud versus on-prem. It's like you're accepting some like friction costs staying on-prem, but you have like a set of processes that are running that are working there. And it's not like the marginal competitor coming on cloud could instantaneously kill you. But here, the productivity advance could be so dramatic that it's like, if you don't make the transition quickly, either a startup is going to grow that's going to do it natively and is going to eat your lunch, or like your marginal incumbent competitor is going to like adopt this stuff more quickly. And suddenly you're going to be way behind on either margins or just ability to deliver customer experiences or whatever. And you'll just, get eaten alive. So.
Yeah, and it's just starting to come into the foreground a little bit with the right kind of resolution, but I think we were going to very clearly have AI native or AI first enterprises, and that will first start with startups that basically they will run on an AI stack, and the way that they program will be AI first, the way that they sell to their customers will be AI first, the way that a new employee onboards and gets information and insights will be AI first, and that company will get 2, 3, 5 times more output per person, when you kind of add up the full collective compared to the company that, let's say, again, was more analog and they just didn't have that kind of set of tooling. And it'll just be so obvious that one company can just completely outrun you and build a better service, change the customer expectations, innovate much faster, and save money. But save money is almost the wrong way to think about it, because they'll just do more output per dollar. And so they might spend actually as much money on engineering headcount on as the other company, but they'll just get 3x more done with that engineering headcount. And so they'll outship you. And that, I think, that lesson will become increasingly obvious across the economy until you have companies that truly wake up to this event. But again, there's not like a major philosophy overhang that's preventing that from happening. You do have, in some large corporations, you have AI councils, there's policy committees, there's, again, that privacy and compliance dynamic that people have to figure out. There are elements where we need case law to emerge around copyright dynamics, but I see those as largely tactical things you can get through. And then maybe the only other one that we run into with customers is their data is often not in a sort of set up in a way to let them most take advantage of AI. And that's obviously us, me sort of, talking through my book, but we look at, environments where data is fragmented across 10, 20, 30 different systems. It's very hard to then really actually, transform what you can do with your information when your financial documents and your marketing assets and your contracts and your kind of internal knowledge base is fragmented everywhere. But I think companies are starting to recognize that they need to upgrade their infrastructure to support that.
So it's interesting because, like, you as CEO, you're sitting here both thinking about how Box needs to like address these needs that customers have, but also you're running an org that needs to be using these tools as well. This was a few months ago, but when kind of like Box appeared on the list of companies where engineers can kind of like work remotely and, ship one thing a month or whatever, you clearly had a reaction to that. Like, how do you think about kind of your own, like making sure your employee base is using these things and maximizing like throughput through the org, and kind of keep the urgency there so that then you can compete and offer these products and services to customers?
Yeah, so we fully looked into that situation. I'm very confident it was a narrow event. However, it did sort of cause some internal introspection. I was like, what the hell is going on here? But beyond that, 1 or 2 engineers. I think the expectation is absolutely going to shift, which is, and I already see it in my probing of different projects. Is like if somebody comes back and they say, hey, this is going to take us 2 days or 3 days. I will literally often go into Claude and be like, I don't understand. Like, I just prototyped this thing. Like, it's just like not that hard. And I've only done that a couple of times, and mostly people would just get really upset with me. But you can see how quickly you can actually be like we can just dramatically lower the complexity and cost of almost doing anything. There'll be situations where it'll be like 10 o'clock at night, and my typical workflow would have been to ping somebody and say, hey, could you, write up this draft or review this thing? And then I'll go into Box AI and, it's wired up to GPT-4 in this case, but you'll just go in and you'll generate it. And I skip over that whole workflow of going into Slack, setting the message, waking up the next day, trying to provide more context. Like, I just did the thing. So, imagine that across every employee. I think you just start to see this acceleration of how enterprises work. And then the output expectation will commensurately just increase for companies that are running this way.
As the way that we're working changes in the way you just described, How does the landscape of enterprise software change in terms of which interfaces we're going to and who's serving those interfaces, or if we're building those interfaces ourselves? And I know you guys recently launched Box apps, and I'm thinking one thesis we have generally is that as the barrier to entry to create software goes down, enterprises can increasingly create their own tools or their own front ends, solve their own, use cases that were not efficient to deploy software against previously or not economical. Like, how is that changing from your point of view?
There's a bit of a raging debate. I don't know if you guys are deep in this debate. So there's sort of this question of like, what's the TAM of software in a world where AI can generate software a lot more? And I mean, I'm curious your take. Maybe I should ask you your takes first before I go into some death trap right now. But what are you guys thinking on that front?
I don't want to bias you.
Okay.
I'm going to distill it. Like we, if you look at share of software spend to like SaaS versus platform as a service versus infrastructure as a service, it's, Frank, you can correct me, but it's kind of like a third right now. And our prior was maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm off on that to some degree. But
50% SaaS applications. The app layer is the biggest right now.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then the other split the rest.
And we had, our prior forecast as of last year had kind of kept that share the same going forward. And we expect there's going to be literally, the current forecast is close to 10 trillion, but I think it's around 8 trillion in AI software spend 2030. And so then you end up with a huge like expectation for SaaS. But since then, we've also shifted kind of like the share that goes into platform as a service and infrastructure as a service, just because like so much more custom software will be built. And so it's actually, our net SaaS expectation has kind of actually marginally decreased as we're expecting kind of more to go into the infrastructure side.
I assume with still larger absolute numbers at the end of that journey.
Oh, sure. Yes.
Yeah. So
yes.
So, okay. It's not like a 90% reduction. So basically, my take would be you have a couple sort of trends that essentially, and again, I'm like in very much biased land, but largely that I think are all net positive for almost the full basket of SaaS. Maybe there's like a couple losers in there, but that almost doesn't matter. Which is all of a sudden, every SaaS provider is also providing some form of operational kind of work and more or less labor, for lack of a better term, built into the software. And so all of a sudden that actually captures more of the economics than you did in a prior world. And so our scenario of that is like kind of really puts the point together. So, let's say pre-AI, something like Box, what we'll sell you is this ability to manage your documents and your ability to kind of like organize all your contracts or your invoices or your financial records. And then you as a customer had to go and figure out how to like extract the data from those documents, put them into a database, automate the workflow. And so you spent a lot of other, dollars outside of Box on both people and software to go and make Box be more productive and effective for you. With AI, we're just baking all of that into our platform. So all of a sudden, we can go to that customer and say, "Hey, you have 100,000 contracts that you have to review." Instead of going and paying X per hour and trying to scale it up, which by the way, most of the time the customer either failed or never just kind of went through with, we can actually capture those dollars now because it's now kind of tied into our platform. So for us, it's a complete TAM increase. I think if you're ServiceNow and you're saying, hey, I can actually respond to your IT tickets for the first time, and you don't have to have a person go and do that response, that's TAM expansion. If you're Salesforce and you say, hey, you want customers to chat with your CRM system and automate a workflow instead of having to, again, have sort of very, very expensive labor do that, that's TAM expansion. It's hard to find software that is not going to experience some form of TAM expansion when AI can plug in, in particular an agentic AI, and do work within your software. So, the percentages that then go to infra and the platform and the SaaS layer, I think are, that will continue to evolve even as of at least this recording with DeepSeek. You have all these X factors of like, well, what if actually infrastructure is more efficient, and then more of the value can go back into the software layer. But overall, I think TAM of software increases, TAM of SaaS increases. There's business model questions, within the SaaS ecosystem? Like, do you charge by consumption of that? Do you charge by outcome measured sort of results? So I charge you per contract that gets reviewed. I charge you per lead that gets created. I charge you per IPO prospectus that gets written, or is it more kind of equivalent to labor, like just pay us per hour and we'll handle that work for you. But overall, I think it's all net positive. And then the only other variable of TAM expansion that is sort of underexplored from the things I've looked at is all of a sudden you actually have software that can be sold into more organizations or more departments because the AI will solve the problem that prevented other companies from not being able to deploy it before. So all of a sudden, like I'm a small business and I can have a contract management system because I never would have paid for somebody to go and like review all my contracts, but now AI is doing it, and so I'm in the market of that category of software in a way that I wasn't before. So I think you're just going to see the size of these markets continue to balloon as a result of AI.
Yes. At a high level, fully endorse that kind of there's a massive, like if you look at the revenue expectation that we have, global IT spend right now is around 4 trillion. And we think that something on the order of 8 trillion is going to be in demand for AI software. And then total revenue is larger than that because you pay into SaaS, which then pays its COGS down into the like foundation model service. So there's actually revenue stacking within the whole stack. How do you think about kind of like you mentioned DeepSeek and, how do you think about the underlying platform that is kind of driving your ability to deliver AI to the end customer, your vulnerability / reliance on an open AI versus an open source model? Like, how do you design around that and think about that?
Yeah, so we made a call within basically 2 weeks of ChatGPT. So everybody had their ChatGPT moment. We had ours. We had an ML, / AI team, obviously built out a box, and ChatGPT kind of opened up, our imagination for a number of new use cases. We kind of locked everybody into a room virtually and then physically and said, okay, we have to build an AI platform layer. And our AI platform layer is basically an abstraction layer between the data in box and then the functionality in box, so i.e. our tools, and then the AI models. And essentially, very quickly, most of SaaS kind of converge on that architecture. We were bouncing off ideas with kind of, peers in the space at the same time. And the core theory was, obviously OpenAI has done this incredible breakthrough. It's a fantastic lead they have. It's awesome. But like Google's not going to stay asleep on this. And so we at a minimum, you've got a 2-player race. We certainly never would have predicted the kind of 6 or 7, legit players that we now have, but we figured at least 2 or 3 players would be meaningful drivers of sort of these LLMs. So we built an abstraction layer, and then we connected to these different platforms. Now, again, we kind of connect to every major model, or we will, and that keeps us basically protected from ever having any real lock-in to any one provider. The other benefit you get is even if you're, quote unquote, locked into, let's say, an OpenAI, which I'm sure some people are, you almost can also get the pricing benefits of a DeepSeek or a Meta, because you know that OpenAI will have to stay competitive to get the incremental customer on their platform. So Sam and Greg and that team are just like continuing to lower prices, because they know that marginal new developer has a choice of where to go. And so ironically, you actually don't even need to move your workloads to get the benefit of the competitive dynamic, because these providers are basically lowering their prices kind of across the board. But we need to, because we have customers with different requirements, or there's different partnership dynamics. But we're just in this amazing moment. And, DeepSeek being the latest breakthrough, which is, people are, teams are continuing to find, I don't think anybody expected an order of magnitude efficiency like this out of nowhere, but we're continuing to find 20, 30, 50% efficiency gains or 90% efficiency gains. And so I think the long term, and we've had this, kind of built into our business model theory for a while, is I think that the price of a token, let's say of perfect intelligence, however you'd want to define that, will eventually converge at the price of the infrastructure costs plus some limited margin for running the infrastructure. So we kind of think about it as there's maybe 10 to 20% margin available for the AI model provider. And then beyond that, it's just like, what is the cost of that infrastructure stack? And those are probably the only available economics in the AI model sort of space. So it's like whatever Azure or Google's or AWS's economics plus, 10%, making up a number for, somebody to come in and like be really good at hosting and producing LLMs, which is fantastic because that means that then basically you don't have too much profit taking coming from the AI model providers. You actually have a lot of room for the software layer to come in and generate, revenue and value.
I guess the pushback I'd have against that is like computation is pretty commoditized, but the infrastructure as a service stack manages to clip 30-ish% margins on top of what they're providing.
I'm fine with whatever the IaaS providers are currently taking as margin. My thinking is whatever Amazon is currently making in margin, that sustains. And then maybe there's room for 5 or 10% more increase in cost for the AI model provider. But then beyond that, there's nothing left.
I would contend that it's kind of like if there's any, like when Amazon was developing AWS, and by the way, like it's amazing that Box became the business that it became. When you launched Box and brought it, when you first started Box in 2004, that was like on the back of, there was this book in .com, like Free, the Future of a Radical Price or whatever. One of their case studies was that cloud storage would converge to free because the marginal cost of delivery was free. And it's like, you're going to get a Gmail with an infinite account. But now I'm having to pay for my stupid Gmail storage because they stopped giving it away free. And then you made a business model on top of this. So it seems like if there's this massive productivity expansion, there's probably room for margin to like kind of accrue in different parts of the stack, potentially, right?
I bet we're saying 80% the same thing if we actually drew out the stack and try to figure out who has leverage. My point would be, and tell me if you think that this is aligned. My point would just be, so I think it's going to be AWS because they have enough sort of moat between all of their services. And so AWS is totally fine, GCP is totally fine, OCI is fine, Azure's fine, et cetera. I think it'd be tough to be a standalone model player because the research is open, the data is more or less open, and now especially that we're seeing from DeepSeek, the cost of actually doing a training run is becoming not as expensive as we thought. So there's not a lot of dollars there. That is also still different than having a case on OpenAI because OpenAI is increasingly looking like a software company because they have the ChatGPT revenue, operator, et cetera. So my only point was for somebody like Box, we're probably not going to give that much margin to the pure AI model provider because we always have the ability to just deploy open source at that layer. We're still going to have to give AWS margin, which then by definition means NVIDIA gets margin, et cetera. I mean, minus the chip dynamics that could play out. But the counter scenario, just to show an alternative scenario that could have emerged, let's pretend that somehow OpenAI 2.5 years ago invented a thing that never was published and there was no research paper and they just had something as proprietary as, the first Oracle database or, any typical SaaS product. If that was what happened, they could probably extract 80% margin on the tokens. And that would have made AI extremely expensive and it would have made it unaffordable for, all of SaaS to basically bake in AI into their products. And that's the part that I think is the nuance here, which is incredible how this all played out.
I think at the very least, DeepSeek has, like, you could say that O1 was potentially that breakthrough, like, test time compute kind of is, at least is an interesting advance. Would others be able, it's rumored that Anthropic is working on one behind the scenes that they're about to release. That's, presumably Google would have figured it out. But the fact that DeepSeek not only open source, like the whole industry had gone towards a spot where we're no longer publishing results because we're going to try to retain trade secrets. DeepSeek just like blew that up and re-up leveled everybody to, it's like, well, everybody's at this stage now. And so definitely like margin at this stage is compressed again. Let's see where you go from here,
Like, again, like 5 years ago, I don't think you would have predicted, 90% of what we're seeing, but like you have like uneconomic actors, entering the space for reasons where like it maybe it's making their quant trading better or whatever, but it might just be because like the team at DeepSeek had nothing else to do, and they just want to cause chaos. But that just has lowered the price of AI by 90%. I mean, conversely, Zuck apparently is totally fine, effectively, doing massive CapEx and training runs because it's going to make his ad targeting better. And at the same time, lo and behold, it pseudo commoditizes potential disruptors and Google even further. So it's like, for a totally, indirect reason, he's totally fine to keep giving away AI, for the world because it's going to bolster his advertising product on a relative basis. So we have these unexpected, things happening in the space. And then on the O1 point on test time compute, I totally agree with you, this pendulum of the sort of research pendulum. But what's interesting, so a friend said this, I don't know, now it's like 2.5 years ago before ChatGPT, he basically said there was no secrets in AI. And I didn't have as much kind of like deep understanding of the impact or essence of that. And I think there's something about this community where it sort of has always remained, academic adjacent enough in just the intellectual, dynamics of it that like these secrets, like they just get shared at dinner. Like, there'll just be an AI researcher dinner and they'll be like, yeah, we tried this thing and it was a breakthrough. And then all of a sudden everybody knows about it in a week. And I don't know if that ever changes. Even if you don't see the research happening, I think the sharing of the breakthroughs, I don't think you can maintain more than a 6 or 12 month lead in anything that is sort of, purely kind of intellectual in nature. I think this stuff always converges on everybody knowing it.
Which is also, like, to your point, the importance of executing on the product side for these, let's call them AI lab companies that are building models and products. And I think that's a really important distinction to make that sometimes people skip over. Like, I even see people say ChatGPT 4.0, and it's like, there is no 4.0. There's ChatGPT, the product, and there's a 4.0 model, and then there's O1 reasoning, and it's all embedded in the product.
Yeah, this is why you don't have any ability to have a bull or bear case on OpenAI as a result of even DeepSeek. Like, because let's say they're clearly going to incorporate any relevant learning from the DeepSeek paper, and if they could make their models that much cheaper to run, certainly they'll maybe like make a basic plan that's only $4.99 a month that is super advanced and has O1 level reasoning. But like for them, the TAM is the entire planet on the software side. And if they, have incrementally less top line revenue in the near term on pure inference, APIs, they can more than make it up in subscriptions. There's many ways to get through this, even if you're OpenAI.
How do you think about the kind of question from the Box perspective of the pricing dynamic here, where it's like, call it the bear case against AI SaaS is like, well, yeah, sure, you can deliver all of this greatness to end customers, but can you actually, efficiently charge for the value that you're offering to end customers? And how do you go about even doing that, since it's such a dramatic increase in kind of productivity that you're delivering?
So I do think, and this is a little bit of recency bias, but my answer would have been 80% the same, a week ago, which is, so the DeepSeek thing kind of further, I think, clarifies the answer to that, which is it's actually just not going to cost that much on the back end. And so then the only question is, how much can SaaS command as a price uplift for their value proposition? And you see a couple different, angles here. So I think, I don't know what the full public, numbers are at this point, or what the stated, situation is. But, I don't know that everybody has said, I'm willing to pay $30 per user per month more for, let's say, the AI Copilot in Office 365. I think people are saying, yeah, I'll test it, I'll deploy it to some teams, but I don't know that I can have everybody, use this for $30 per user per month. And we just saw Google actually, essentially, leapt ahead to the future end state, which is they said, actually, we're probably just going to bake this in to the kind of core productivity subscription, which is what they announced, a couple of weeks ago. Even GitHub Copilot, there's now a free version. So I think I think this kind of points to where things are going, which is you're going to have AI get baked into the enterprise software. You're not going to have this whole sort of charge $50 more per user per month. So people, I think, probably need to tone down their expectations of of just infinite budget increases as a result of AI, because I think it's because the cost of AI is less than we thought. And so thus the customer need to pay for it is also less because competition will sort of lower those prices. And then I think each market has a different way of extracting value. So if I take something in your business that used to cost you $100,000 per unit, and I can make that, for $5,000, well, and it only cost me $100, like, holy crap, that's an incredible business. If there's something in your business that used to cost you $100 and it cost me $50 to do, and at most I could charge you $60, then that's not that great of a business. And so I think each part of the market, ServiceNow will have a different story than Salesforce, than Box, than Office, and I think each company will have a different way of kind of working through this.
We might end up in a hybrid approach where you have this kind of, per month license or per user license with some consumption limit, because I feel like it has to be tied to consumption to a way. And I'll just give you a fictional example to see if this makes sense. Picture I'm a startup and I need to do customer service, and I would hire 10 people for this, and we get 100 cases a day. And it costs me a certain amount. That's why I need 10 people. And I pay for those 10 people, I don't know, $30 a month for this service. And you tack on AI and it's included just for whatever this is. If my startup's very successful, my case volume goes from 100 cases a day to 10,000 cases a day, you can't still charge the same amount for that because you're incurring 100,000x more compute to do it, right? So there has to be some gate on actual consumption at some point, even if the margin on that compute is very low.
I probably could have been more clear on this, which is why I think you need to decouple the different software providers, because some software providers have this very discrete, I have replaced or augmented labor in a very measurable way, versus others are kind of, it's this sort of, fluid productivity gain. Like, how much value is there, when Gemini generates an email text for you? Nobody can really measure that. And so
there might be negative value, actually.
Okay, yeah, actually, yeah. So more emails that we're all sending to each other. So maybe, yeah, you'd pay to turn that off probably. But basically, so like if you're in this very kind of amorphous productivity increase land, you probably have less ability to charge, for the volume. And that's probably just like, at best, you're either going to bake it in or it's a small uplift, versus if you're handling case volume, I know exactly how much that costs per employee to go do that. You tell me how much I'm going to save, and we share some of the benefit from a margin standpoint. And then it would sort of be very consumption oriented. And I think, so in our case, we have versions of both. We have a version which is, hey, I want to summarize documents and I want to ask questions of my data. Well, we basically anticipate that will be free and included over time. Right now, it's in our highest tier plan, but we kind of know where the general puck is going on that. Versus, I want an agent to review a document, pull out the relevant data, automate a workflow. That's something that is very measurable by the customer. They know exactly it used to take a person an hour. So let's say that's $30 or $40 of work. Well, I would pay $2 to do that in an automated way. And oh, by the way, it only costs Box 10 cents. I'm making up every one of those numbers, but it's at least very measurable, and you can see that it's going to become consumption oriented as a result of that.
Yeah. And it's those latter parts that I think, to your point earlier, is the part that's massively TAM expanding. You're taking something that used to be like concretely tied to human labor time or expense in some other way, and you're augmenting it with software.
Exactly. And the thing that I think that people miss in a lot of the debate, and now it's coming up again because everyone's talking about Jevons paradox and around like efficiency gains. Do you increase the consumption of that thing more than the efficiency gain? In our case, most of the use cases that we're going to be doing with AI are often ones that customers have always wanted to do. They kind of did it in a very limited way with people, but they never scaled it to all of their business. And so in our case, it's really is going to be new dollars. It's not replacing actual humans every single time. It's actually bringing that use case to a small business or to a team in a department that never had the resources. And so there's a lot of efficiency because the company now, for the first time ever, actually can just go and deploy software to automate something that they just dealt with the fact that it was manual before.
the world is heavily under softwared. I think people really don't understand the degree to which we are starving for software in all kinds of like areas. And like what this does is it makes software able to be essentially custom built and fit up against the world in a much more cohesive way. And so all of those, in some ways, as a software provider, you're fitting up against an organization that actually has like very poor stitching function between different things that it's doing. And kind of like you can be that stitching function and make things a lot more cohesive and fluid and work a lot better.
That's totally true. And I'll probably get canceled for this. Nobody actually wants to hear this probably, but every time you see like the bar chart of like, the tech industry spend relative to all the industries, finance, et cetera, I'm always like, how is it that tech is actually so small? And it's not like tech should be like everything and everybody needs to be a software engineer, but like literally, how is the budget of a life sciences company not 2x more software oriented in a world of the kinds of medicines that we're going to be producing, right? How is the tech budget of banking not increasingly almost all digital? I think that just points to we're still in a decade or two long journey of if it's, I don't know what it is, 5 or 10% today of the GDP is tech or whatever the industry breakout. It's not obvious why that's not double in that kind of time period.
A way that we approach it is to say that global knowledge work wages are going towards 35 trillion by 2030. Right. And so if you're only paying, like, think about if you interpret AI software as a mechanism that can increase the productivity of a knowledge worker by some multiples, right? Then like actually only spending 8 trillion on AI software by 2030 is, we're probably underspending still. Like you actually need orgs to adopt it more quickly. And so, kind of startups will grow up and eat them alive if they don't. And so then that should be a forcing function that makes it happen.
That's an interesting top-down way to get to the number. I was kind of talking to some engineers recently here a couple of weeks ago, just doing a random kind of walk-around survey. And, the range of productivity gains on AI in coding were, some people were, it was 5 or 10%. They only use it in certain situations to help improve some code, find a bug, do some kind of, background script. And then on the upper bound, some people were like 80%. And this is obviously like somebody just completely turbocharged with AI. You go around to any startup and you sort of say, what's your stack look like? And Cursor has certainly taken over the world in a lot of these environments, and people just cannot code without that at this point. So I think it will be a meaningful portion of kind of productivity over the long run.
Well, and also if you step forward a couple of years and you have, like, you're spinning up a set of autonomous agents that is doing a bunch of stuff for you, and you're kind of like, you're almost resource allocating at that point with some kind of like architecture on the back end, what is like the force amplification of the person making the decisions is like massively larger in that set of circumstances.
Yeah, this went pretty viral, but Jensen had this concept of IT as the HR of AI. And so he said this at CES, and it's kind of a fun mental exercise to think through, because you used to go to HR and you say, hey, I need 10 more I need 10 more sales reps to generate leads. And they set up the job recs and do the interviewing, and maybe if you're lucky 3 or 6 months later, you'd have all the people. Now you'll just go to IT and you'll say, hey, I need 1,000 agents to go and do this particular task for me. And like maybe tomorrow you'll have those agents set up to go and do that. And it's like it's a whole new world of doing work. And so you do have to think about kind of resource planning, thinking through that digital labor. What is it good at? What should your people be doing? How do you augment that as effectively as possible? You could go really far with this analogy, and your IT department really has to think through the needs of the whole business. They have to be coming with their form of talent, i.e. AI labor. How do you govern that? How do you sort of manage all of those AI agents? Super interesting question, but then the benefit of you have this kind of elastic capacity as a business that you can just deploy against anything that kind of comes up. So by analogy, also, it's exactly what cloud did for compute. AI is now doing for kind of intellectual, work.
Yeah, there's a funny thing. I think we've talked about this a couple of times, Brett, but the Steve Jobs, I think it's attributed to Steve Jobs. He's talking to a bunch of MBAs and he talks about, ideas are great. You can have all the strategies in the world, but it's all about execution and, building great products. And it's almost like the ability to execute is growing so quickly that the actual ideas and deciding what to execute are now relatively more important. Like I think of this sometimes, like I'm sure you have a product backlog and things you want to build over the next few months and years on different scopes. And if your engineering output increases 2x or 3x because I'm saving 50% of the time from each engineer, it's like, okay, we can ship twice as much stuff. What are we going to ship? You now have like harder decisions on that front, not just, we can only build so fast.
Yeah, there's a whole conversation to be had just around like what is the future of work look like on the human side. And I think, the things that go up are like judgment, creativity, intuition, ingenuity. And one engineering manager was playing around with Devin from Cognition. And so, for anybody that doesn't know, you kind of talk to Devin through Slack and you're like, hey, Devin, look at this bug, please go fix it. And it goes off and it looks in your repo and comes back 10 minutes later saying, hey, here's the new code, I fixed your bug. With, X amount of effectiveness at this stage, you can kind of think a couple steps ahead and realize this turns the future engineer into an engineering manager. And what they're now having to do is figure out like, what is the right way to talk to the AI to get the thing done that I want? What is the right way? Well, I have to review the code, that gets generated. So I have to be as smart as ever. But now I might be able to do 5 times the amount of output because instead of me spending a day doing this really annoying bug fix that would have, depleted my whole day, like I just have that going on in the background with an AI agent that goes and fixes that. I review it at the very end, maybe clean up some code. And so, you're becoming a manager of AI agents. Again, judgment goes up, the sort of, kind of coordination of work, that becomes incredibly important. But it's a totally different way to work in the future.
And I would say the other thing that matters is urgency. And that to me is like, it's almost like the thing that must keep you up at night. It keeps us up at night. We're trying to like adopt processes into our org. It's like, are we moving quickly enough here? Probably not, because the underlying capability set is advancing so rapidly that if you don't have like a set of people who are just like, yes, let's like try this stuff, figure out how to use it, figure out how to deploy it, figure out how to get our data in shape to use it and do it better, then we're going to wake up a year from now and we're going to be the equivalent of 5 years behind because of how quickly things are moving.
Yeah, I think that's totally right. The compounding nature of this is super relevant. There's one asterisk that I just put, and you have to kind of decide which swim lane it's relevant for. But ironically, there's a corollary to how fast everything is moving, which is you could actually end up, again, you could end up backing the wrong thing architecturally, only to be then leapfrogged, 1 year later. So architecture really matters in terms of like, what are the things that you're making decisions that are kind of like, where you're stuck with a platform or a particular, system versus which things do you have some fungibility and some ability to have optionality. Again, this is sort of the world that we think about all day long, but if you don't have optionality of what AI models your data can talk to, you could be stuck on an architecture that is not getting all the benefits accruing to it from, X breakthrough. And so architecture really matters. Having frameworks really matter about which things you're going to deploy, how embedded do you get into those things so you can't move off them. But to your point, like leaning in is unquestionably important. But having an architecture that is sort of somewhat future proof matters a lot to get these gains.
Well, Aaron, this has been great conversation. And what do you like if you cast yourself forward a couple years? What do you think that kind of box will look like, and how deeply will it be kind of being driven internally and in terms of external customer facing by AI?
Yeah. So on the internal side, as kind of noted, we expect to run our business as an AI first company. So that again takes on a different meaning depending on your role. If you're an engineer, AI should assist how you're coding and solve problems for you. If you're a sales rep, it should help you sell the right thing to the customer at the right time. We have a feature which kind of emerged right at the same time as the kind of ChatGPT moment, which is the ability to kind of organize data on any topic that you want, and then be able to ask that sort of, we call it a hub, any kind of question. So you can imagine, you're a sales rep, you're in front of a customer, you instantly need a personalized answer or custom message based on all of the knowledge within Box, but tailored to that customer. We have a feature that sort of does that automatically, and then it will show up in lots of different kind of endpoints and interfaces. So the way you sell will change, the way you onboard as an employee will change, the way we handle customer support, challenges will change. We'll become much more proactive. You'll use automation for the easy stuff that's inbound. You'll become proactive and much more, predictive on the outbound side. So I think the way that we work will change. And then from a business and platform standpoint, I think my increasing way of sort of understanding this and thinking about the future is kind of goes back to just understanding the trajectory of software. Like, if you go back, let's say 30 years, the kind of origin of enterprise software was systems of record, the Oracle database, the ERP system, the first CRM systems from Siebel, et cetera, the, BMC, ITSM system, like core systems of record. You put data in them. You sort of get limited amount of output of that data because it's really about where your data is going, maybe some computation, limited engagement in those systems. That's kind of systems of record. Then you had systems of engagement. That was the kind of era that we initially kind of grew up in. Cloud, mobile, much more user-friendly, collaborative. Users are talking to each other. The data becomes a lot more unstructured. So we're engaging in chats and documents and video. So that's kind of this messy era of us, kind of working with our software. Now I think we're entering, very clearly this idea of systems of intelligence, which is, well, what happens if I now have AI that can look at all that messy, unstructured data, and it can automate workflows. It can bring intelligence to every part of my business. That's the sort of era that I think we're entering right now, finally. And so the way that we think about it is, how do you build software for that world where your software is intelligent, your technology answers questions for you, it automates work for you. And we think that almost the lifeblood of those systems will be your unstructured data and your content. And so we need to be the best place to store and manage and govern, but then bring intelligence to all of your unstructured data. And then we'll link up and connect to any other technology you have. So maybe it's Copilot, maybe it's ChatGPT, maybe it's ServiceNow, maybe it's Salesforce. Wherever you want to do your work, we will then plug into those different technologies, and we want to be the system where you're managing your content and your unstructured data in an intelligent way.
Oh, you got me sold. Maybe we should use Box at Arc. Frank,
one at a time.
You got to talk to Mark and get. Really appreciate you coming on the podcast, and really a great conversation. And good luck, moving quickly and executing efficiently in the age of AI.
Well, we'll do our best, but good to see you guys. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for listening to this episode of FYI, the For Your Innovation podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please hit that like button and make sure to leave a comment down below letting us know what you thought. And if you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe to the show and follow us at ARK Invest on your favorite social platforms so you stay up to date whenever we drop a new episode.
ARK believes that the information presented is accurate and was obtained from sources that ARK believes to be reliable. However, ARK does not guarantee the accuracy or completeness of any information, and such information may be subject to change without notice from ARK. Historical results are not indications of future results. Certain of the statements contained in this podcast may be statements of future expectations and other forward-looking statements that are based on ARK's current views and assumptions, and involve known and unknown risks and uncertainties that could cause actual results, performance, or events to differ materially from those expressed or implied in such statements.